Adam and Eve. The story about Adam and Eve in the Bible is, of course, allegory. As we have often stated, the Bible is not a history book, but a guide for all people, to help them approach the feet of God. Now, most people are aware of the story of Adam and Eve, but how many people understand its meaning, in terms of its relationship to man incarnate? Like all the stories in the Bible, one must search for its correlation with the human population incarnate, both today and long ago. The story actually talks about people's level of spirituality. It refers to the supposition that many of us who incarnate are ignorant of the fact that we are one with God. So, how can we infer that relationship from the story of a couple of beings, a serpent and a piece of fruit? We must remember that the people who wrote that story lived in the Middle East, and thus a snake, quite apart from its physical attributes, was considered to have special, spiritual properties. Today, of course, we see it more as just an animal, either harmless or mortal, according to its venomous properties. But, in those far-off days, it was perceived very differently, and in the story of Adam and Eve, it represents God, as was understood by those people. Which is, perhaps, why King Tutankhamun had a crown on his head, with a cobra on it. This could represent two things. 1. That he was the representative of God on earth, and 2. A warning, that if one opposed him, the snake, being venomous, would eliminate that person, or faction. The apple represents the information that we incarnate to learn. This being, of course, that everything, including us, is God, and by ingesting the apple, we could wake up to the realization that we are God. The apple, being nourishment, is the means of us ingesting the knowledge that we are God. This fruit represents the power of God, contained in all things. It was used as an example of the power of God, and, in reality, anything comestible could have been used. However, there is a little more to the use of an apple, in that, it comes from a tree, and the tree is used to illustrate a concept called the tree of life. Now, unfortunately, we must mention the archons. Originally, the story of Adam and Eve was used to promote the feminine concept that we all have. The masculine was used to represent physicality, and the feminine was used to represent the divine, spiritual part of us. So, the archons, as they usually do, took the story, turned it on its head, and represented Eve as a devilish aspect, instead of the divine part of us. The original story was this. We have a physical body, the masculine. We also have the spiritual part of us, the feminine. The apple represents us gaining knowledge of our divinity, and the snake represents God. Through consuming the apple, which means absorbing spirituality, we gain access to God. So, the archons twisted the story, and now presented Eve as a wicked person, defying God, and gaining knowledge about matters that God did not want divulged. The complete opposite of the truth of the story. It is time for man to wake up to the truth of his spiritual origins, reject the archon versions of things, and integrate spirituality into his life. Then, will the masculine and the feminine, the physical and the spiritual, be joined into man complete, in all domains.